We're in Cuba Mall. This is the bucket fountain designed by Graham Allardice. My first memory of the bucket fountain is when we came down from Palmerston North when I was 5. You know, as a kid, it was just agape looking at the water falling down to the big bucket. Whoa! I was going to do a Transplasticism involving one of the buildings on Cuba Mall melting out over the street like a mass lava flow, as if the facade had turned to jelly or liquid, you know. I was proposing this to one of the property owners around here, Ian Castles, who owns a few buildings, and I was saying to him, you know, do you want to put some money in to fund this really unusual event, you know, blah, 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 quite unique, Cuba Mall, public interaction, you know. And he, just as a sort of passing, flippant kind of cast-aside joke, said, oh, why don't you cover the bucket fountain? Yes, John Radford is an artist who makes things. I'm definitely someone who is always looking, learning, and putting that back into my work. All of this gets covered, clay, billions of fingerprints, clay. But the bucket fountain seemed like the ideal stage to commit this act upon, to have this process interact with. The bucket fountain covers the land in Cuba Mall. Here's the land, some clay, covering the bucket fountain. And it just seemed like such a perfect thing to do. The buildings, I've done buildings, so I don't really need to go back there, but this is like this little acupressure point, a wrinkle in the city that, you know, some people would rather was just removed with a facelift, cut and tuck, or ironed out or something, but it really is quite unique how it arrived in 1969 and it's still there. It was where this bucket fell as a kid, but there was a big moment, you know, when the whole thing's filled up and away! Southern lights, we found you. Southern lights, southern lights, surround you. Southern lights.
It was really not expected to last very long, and frankly, that it's there 37 years later astonishes and to some degree appalls me. The Watermobile, which is what it was to me, was a kinetic work that was wanted, something of interest in the Mall, and it was designed primarily to be attractive to people and interesting to people, not specifically as a thing of beauty. The construction of the thing itself was great fun. Everything was done on a shoestring, in a great hurry, and often at night. When I heard John's idea of covering it in clay, I was delighted. It appealed to me for it all to be in one colour and texture. In a sense, that brought it back a little bit like its first concept, which was not multicoloured.
I invented the word transplastic to describe a state.
So this is really great.
To put it into the verb, to transplasticize means to change the appearance of an object by covering it in a malleable substance by hand and allowing that substance to change in plasticity. That's it.
So I kind of like that. Send up.
Using clay, something I've worked with a lot as a sculptor.
The clay comes off the static clay. It's great malleable clay. This is perfect for making pots and covering things.
Using a concept of transforming the appearance of objects, and that transformation itself transforms. It's quite an interesting concept.
The Bucket Fountain's got the walls of the pool, which are at a good little height to sit down and cut clowns and lights.
And also that idea of confronting people with something in a public space that is very unexpected.
And just peel those slices off.
The first Transplasticism was the wall of my flat in London. I covered the whole wall of the flat in clay just to see how it worked. Then we did 8 cars in the AK03 festival, a bus, a 3-storey building, and these were all done in public spaces and done without a lot of notification, so people just walked down the street early morning and there they were. We're down at the container terminal down at Centre Port in Wellington, and this car is a 1965 Holden, and it came from the Horopito Wreckers Yard. I heard it had been in a lake for a while somewhere in its past. I'm going to use it in such a way to chop it in half and put the top half on the ground around the fountain, so it's going to be melting into the ground. Means that all of this comes out, all of that, not all of that, almost all of that, but we just take it out anyway, because you're not going to see it. A lot of these would have been around the bucket fountain at the time it was put up and installed, so it's like a reference to the past, the birth of the bucket fountain. This is part of its past environment, if you like. This is almost like a ghost revisiting from the past to the present. Really, and this is going. This is sort of heading. I think we keep the more. You know, when you pour golden syrup, and it always just has that big elasticy kind of
big long thing. That's what I'm doing with this long one I've got at the moment.
Great. We're carving all these large, gooey, viscous drips and blobs, and these are going to be attached onto parts of the structure of the fountain, and just give the suggestion that things are in much more of a state of flux than they really look. That is for the first 2 days, and then of course in the second 2 days of the installation the clay will be drying and cracking and falling off, and showing that these are indeed just fake bulk outs. 3,400 kilograms of malleable clay, 30 people to help create the installation, a giant vinyl airbag and a vacuum cleaner, ladders, an old Holden station wagon body, 6 tarpaulins, a hose, a sprinkler system, haloed floodlights, extension cords, screeds of stuff. Dad was a potter when I was a kid, and had a very early sense of being able to make stuff with clay and forming things with my hands. It was funny when I started working after school. You know, I left secondary school, coming to the city and getting to know the whole historic environment. That building's older than that one's being knocked down, there's a new one being built there. Unfortunately, it was the 1980s, which was the march of the mirror glass shoebox through the city. And a lot of, quite aesthetic, high quality, historic structures were being smashed to pieces by, quick buck developers. I was observing that and photographing that at the time. So I was out there with my camera, breaking into buildings that had been condemned for demolition and doing a whole photographic survey of the interior and breathing in that whole sense of age, and there's something else going on. There's this almost like a feeling of spirit in these spaces because so many people have been in them.